thank you for joining us for the second session of Kitchen Garden Design with Ellen. Um, I'm just a reminder, if you have any questions regarding the online platform, the D2L Brightspace, please feel free to write in the chat if you have a question, or if you have another online question specifically. I would recommend emailing the MLS help at longwoodgardens.org email address, and that has that team constantly monitors that email, and they answer all the questions regarding that online platform, regarding resources, assignments, all that. And without further ado, I will pass it over to Ellen.
Thank you. And your name is Diane.
Oh, sorry. Yes. I introduced myself to Ellen, but not to you guys. So my name's Diane. You most likely got an email from me with all the links. So I am the one that if you ever have questions with your emails, you can also let me know.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Diane. Appreciate it. Hi, everybody. Hi. I know you're muted, but I want to say hi and unmute if you want to and say hi to everybody. Did you get snow down there? I mean, I heard that there was snow in the South and DC area. You did. Was that kind of a surprise and a shock? Were you ready for it?
No, we get snow. We get snow once or twice a year.
You do? Good.
Yeah.
Good. Good. Well, we've just had little bits every night. We have about 2 or 3 inches here. I'm in Vermont.
Oh, wow.
But the snowplow still goes by and drops the salt, which I don't like very much, but can't deal with that. So I have to say it's so much fun going through your class assignments, because now I can put like your gardens to your face and kind of get to know you a little bit. I feel like we've really made a lot of progress in this first week. And you put so much effort into your work. And I just want to say thank you very much. I really, really appreciate it. That makes me feel like I'm doing my job to encourage you and inspire you. So thank you for doing your part as well. One of the wonderful things about senior work, and I'm going to, at the end of this slideshow, I'm going to share each one of your projects. If you don't want me to share it, send me a note, raise your hand, put a thing in chat. But I pretty much put 2 pictures from everybody's work into this, because I think it's really helpful to be able to see what other people do, see, the detail that some people get into, the types of obstacles and challenges we have, to kind of just realize that we're all coming at this from a different place, and that we're all here to just learn from each other as well. So I think you really enjoy that part of the show. Today we're going to talk about elements of style, and you haven't met my cat. I'm back in Vermont. Remember last week I was in California, and I said that you're definitely going to meet my cat, because she loves to be on camera, and I'll introduce her. This is Catherine. Cat for short. I'm not sure why she's crying. She probably wants a second dinner, but she's going to constantly make her way across. She's 20 years old. I got her at a farmer's market for my son for Christmas 20 years ago. And here she is. But we're not here to talk about cats. We're here to talk about garden design. So we're going to do a slideshow at the end of your work. I noticed some of you included photos, which it was really nice for me to see the photos. I didn't ask for photos, but I was glad those of you who did have photos included them, so I could sort of get a layout. I purposely didn't ask for photos because I'm hoping that at this first stage, it's still all in your mind's eye. You can just kind of picture what it looks like, what you think it looks like. I know some of you went out and measured and stuff like that, but when we're photo driven, it can sometimes influence our big vision for how we want it to be. So go ahead and send photos next time around if you want to. It does help me visualize it and make constructive comments back to you. And the other thing I just want to remind you is to keep it simple. And many of your designs were great and clean and simple. In the other class, there were a few where there was just like, there was a rhubarb plant here and raspberries over here and flowers over here and wild, things over there. My suggestion is to try and contain as much as you can within one space, because it's going to be easier to maintain. It's going to be easier if you have a lawn to get the lawnmower around. you know, there's just different, you know, there's lots of reasons to try and keep it somewhat contained in terms of just, you know, your pure enjoyment of creating that space. But if you prefer the, you know, the chaos of having lots of different gardens, that's your choice as well. So anyways, we're going to be talking today about elements of style, and these are the 6 steps that I call the 6 steps to successful kitchen garden design. And I came to these 6 steps when I went to visit gardens. When I wrote my first book, The Complete Kitchen Garden, I have to admit that I had this idea, but I didn't have the gardens. I didn't have that much experience putting in gardens. I was mostly an artist and drawing things. And I thought, you know, I better go out and visit some gardens and see if these things will really work and what kind of ideas do I have. And so I learned by going to gardens, what are the elements that I saw in all the nice gardens. And we're going to be talking, first of all, paths and garden beds, um, gates and fences, benches, art elements, things like that, that don't necessarily have to do with planting. And I know all of you are getting anxious because those seed catalogs are arriving and you want to start making that plant list, but we're going to do that next week. We're still right now just creating the foundation and the structure. So before I get started, does anybody have any quick questions right in the beginning? Anything they want to say? No, okay. I think somebody just sent me a note saying, sorry, I wasn't able to do the assignment. That's fine. I, you know, we're all adults here. I'm not really grading anybody based on whether you did something or not. As long as at the end you want to catch up and you want to credit, then I'll make sure, you know, I mark it. You don't get any points off for being late. It's really completely up to you. So thank you for being conscientious. I think you'll get the most out of the class if you do follow it step by step, but gosh, we all have busy lives and we can't always do that. So it's absolutely fine. I'm going to share. And tell me if you can see this. I don't like being a talking head, but if you can all see this, then I will just close out my screen here. So this class is the art of growing food, and we're covering mostly design elements. Next week, we're going to be talking about seeds and soil and compost, and then garden tools. And looking at final projects, which always comes up a little too fast for me. But class number 2 is about beauty, elements of style, those artistic pieces that you can put in your garden that will bring it up a notch, that will transform an ordinary garden into something that's extraordinary. And mostly these are lots of pictures. I think if I just completely stayed quiet and let you just see the pictures, you could get just as much out of these photographs as me chattering away, but somehow I feel I have to chatter. So just look at the photos, and then if you want to, you can go back. But I think you're going to be very inspired by the gardens and the elements that you see here. And hopefully you'll be able to integrate some of these into your own designs. So the 5 elements of, I know I said there's 6, but we're covering 5 today. We're going to start with paths, garden beds. Some of you may already have the garden beds that you like, but some of you are starting with something completely new and fresh. And so we'll be discussing the different options. Fences and gates, and then those personal touches that you can add to the garden that really make it sing. So just a quick review. Last week, we started with the site. Your job was to do the big picture, small picture, look at your whole yard, and then zoom in and look at where you want to have your kitchen garden and more or less what kind of shape and size that would be. So we looked at the site, pick a kitchen garden site with good southern exposure, and then consider all the views, both inside and outside the house, and picture in your mind's eye how a garden could fit into your landscape and the natural routine of your day. And would you enjoy looking down on the garden from your kitchen window? And so that involved doing a 5-year plan. Maybe it's a 2-year plan. Some of you don't even have a house yet. You're still working on that. And so it's really just that pipe dream that you have, and that's great. I'm delighted you're in the class, and hopefully you'll be able to take away enough so that when you do have your land and your house, you'll have a beautiful garden. And so part of that involves dreaming a little bit, trying to create that vision. And this is a picture of my house after I had been working on it for about 18 years. So it doesn't start like this. It starts very rough. And I'm not even going to go back and show you. In fact, for years when I taught this class, I wouldn't show people pictures of my first garden because I was so embarrassed by it. I would only show them the nice pictures. But I realize now that gardens don't have to be perfect. Gardens make us happy in whatever form they can take. And so this was my vision. I was proud enough at this point to be able to create a photograph that I can show you. And of course, we can't take time to sit and contemplate the garden when we're outside unless you want to bundle up and find a nice place to sit. But come spring, I'm hoping you're going to find a nice place to put your garden bench and sit. And remember that gardens are always changing and evolving. And even when you think you've got it right, you may want to change it, because that's the beauty of it. It's kind of like moving furniture around in your house. It's good for a while, and sometimes it's nice to change it up a bit. So don't be afraid to make changes if you decide you want to. And this is a big question that I will have for you at the end of class. Did you learn something unexpected when you went outside in your yard? I know some of you did some wonderful history about the land, and you might have learned something that you didn't know about the land. And maybe taking a closer look at your landscape, you learned some things about maybe how the trees are growing, and the root system might be too bound up and you can't plant underneath that tree that you wanted to plant, or there's water running through your property. So I hope you'll continue to keep looking at your landscape and analyzing it, and remembering that where you think the garden should be may not be where you ultimately put it. So just stay open and fluid. I love it when you create mood boards, and Pinterest is a wonderful place to find garden pictures that you can set up and create mood boards, and adding visuals to your basic hardscape drawing. In some of your assignments, I saw you had done that, and that was really helpful for me to see the type of style that you bring to your garden. And identify sources and dig deeper with more photos. And so, places to get raised beds. I was doing a search this afternoon on where to find different types of metal edging for my garden. So, constantly being able to feed that curiosity and looking at all the options will really help you to become a better gardener and also create the garden that you most want to have. And so, today we're going to be talking about elements of style and continuing to immerse yourself in the design process in whatever way that takes. So we're going to start by talking about garden paths. Now, paths are what is considered the bones of the garden. They set up the structure. In this particular garden design here that I have in my book, we have the main paths, which are where you enter and you walk through the garden. And those are typically 4 feet wide, so you can get a wheelbarrow or you can walk side by side. And then there's the auxiliary paths, the little path that you use to get in when you're weeding or picking or harvesting. And this particular illustration doesn't have as many auxiliary paths, but I'll point them out in some of the future photos that you see. So paths hold the design together and establish the character of the kitchen garden, and set the paths between the garden beds in a practical design that allows for enough room to turn the wheelbarrow and easy movement. The main garden paths are ideally 3 to 4 feet wide, and auxiliary paths can be just enough for a stepping stone to get into the beds for weeding. Plan your paths for easy access to the tool shed and the compost pile. And that would mean sometimes having an entrance and an exit. I taught this class last night, and one of the takeaways from somebody was like, God, I didn't think about having two exits, two entrances for the kitchen garden. And it's like having a front door and a back door. The front door is where you enter, and the back door is where you take the compost out to the compost piles or get to the garden shed or something. So, don't limit yourself just to one entrance into your garden if you can. So some examples of paths. Now, these are maybe a little more grandiose than the paths that you're going to put into your garden. This one on the right is the Memphis Botanic Garden, and the one on the left is an enormous kitchen garden on Cape Cod. And both are edged in a nice boxwood to keep that garden within it. Sort of controlled chaos is a term that I like to use for gardens, because if it didn't have that boxwood holding it in, it might just look like a kind of wild garden. But somehow having that structure keeps everything looking at least a little tidier than it is in reality. But the path material on the left is a nice small bluestone, and I love the color of it and how it picks up the blue of this fence, and it picks up the blue green of all this other foliage. And this is a more permeable, in a lot of botanic gardens now, they have this kind of it's not pebbles, but it's stone, and it's actually can get the rainwater can actually go through it, so it doesn't stay on top. But it's probably not something you would put in your garden, but it might be something you can explore if you want to. Examples of a more natural path. This is my back garden. These are marble steps, and they're a little wonky because that's just what happens to them over time. But it's filled in with lots of creeping thyme and nepeta and the blue geranium and some wonderful mullein plants, whereas the garden on the right-hand side has a tidier look to it. And again, it's a botanic garden, so the paths are super wide. They're probably more like 6 feet wide, which is, will hold a crowd. I don't think you would necessarily want to put that in, but notice how they're nicely edged with just a little lip of the brick going around, and so it holds that garden in place, and it matches the color of the path. Two examples from Colonial Williamsburg, which is a place I love to visit. I've gotten so many of my ideas, and I have a number of slides from Colonial Williamsburg in this presentation. And I love the way they've used brick in this wonderful ornamental way. Again, using brick and then using brick as an edging is a really nice combination. And here they use oyster shells and brick together, and have created a multi kind of visual aspect to that garden by having the pathways that go around the outside, and also the pathways that go in the center. Two more examples of paths. The marble is my front yard. All of us here in Manchester, Dorset area have marble because we have quarries nearby, and it just seems to be that the stone that everybody uses. And so whatever stone you use, it's good if you can use a local stone if possible. It will look that much better with your landscape. And this wonderful path here, this was from Mount Vernon. I took this photo, I think 2 years ago. And those bricks, apparently they're the original bricks, which just blows my mind that they could be that old. Notice how they've repaired the cracked ones, and the lineup of the smaller bricks along the edge is a little bit crooked, but just to be able to use those wonderful old historic bricks in that garden was just, it just felt so good to be able to walk on these bricks that I knew were so decades or centuries old. Sorry, I'm losing my breath. And combinations of things too, like at Hollister House Garden, they use the small pea gravel, which it's lovely. I like pea gravel. I love the crunch it makes when you walk on it. But then there are areas where they use old stone, which this garden was built in 1979, but it has the feel of an old English garden. If any of you have been there, you just feel like you've stepped into Sissinghurst, but it's really not that old. But part of its magic is that they have used wonderful old stones in the pathways. And then something simple like this, which is just a nice bluestone slate. It's a little slippery when it's raining, but it pulls out that color of the foliage so nicely. Another nice thing about using stones in the pathway is that it suppresses weeds. When you have gardens that are built on the old Victory Garden style with the pathway and then the row and the path and the row, you're having to weed twice as much because you're weeding the paths as much as you are the rows. So trying to cut down on how much weeding you do will really make a difference in terms of how much time and enjoyment you get from your garden. This is a lovely little garden in Dorset, Vermont, and it's a little too tidy for my taste, but it has all the elements that we're talking about today. So it's a really good example. Or really in this whole class, it has all the elements. And I didn't design it, but I was like, wow, this is a great looking garden. It's got the 4 square that we've talked about, and notice the wide 4-foot wide paths in between, and then those stepping stones in the garden or the auxiliary paths. And it has a lovely little white garden gate that matches the white chairs off in the distance. And there's a nice little table for eating outside. And the garden shed is right there snug up against the fence for the gardener to be able to access her garden tools. She also keeps a refrigerator in there. So when she's having dinner out in the garden, she has a place to keep her chilled wine, which is a wonderful add-on if you want to make that in your own garden. But notice the trellises, these wonderful bamboo. I adore bamboo. You'll be seeing a couple more examples of bamboo. They sell bamboo just about anywhere, any hardware store these days. I tend to buy them by the 50 pack from a company called A.M. Leonard, and I usually get 10-foot, 8-foot, 6-foot, different types of sizes, and they're wonderful for adding that height and drama to the garden. And the other thing about this garden is that notice how the flowers are all the way around the edges. So instead of having a completely separate garden over here, for instance, with her flower garden, she's integrated all the flowers right around the edge of the garden. So the pollinators just come to one place and it keeps them happy. Another wonderful example of some natural stones. The garden on the left is a flower garden at Hildene, which is a historic place here in Manchester. And I love the different variations of the color. It's not just one color like the blue stone is. And same with the garden stones on the right-hand side, and how those draw your eye in, and they're all different sizes, and yet they all fit together nicely by with a really cohesive look to them. The garden on the left is the Chef at the Equinox, or formerly the Chef at the Equinox, which is a resort in town, just a stone's throw away from my house. And when I was writing my book, I offered to design a garden for him so I could use it to photograph. And we put in this really nice of herbs that he was able to use, and I put a garden bench in there so he could sit, and a silly little garden fence that's just kind of a fakey, but it creates the boundary around it. And I came back to photograph the garden, and he had his friend there, his sous chef, install the marble in the pathways, which I was a little bit like, really? Those look so terrible. But at the same time, you know, they serve a purpose. They didn't want to step in the mud. Using a bark mulch would have created more dirt on their nice white. So whatever kind of path works, it doesn't really matter if it works for you. And the garden on the right-hand side, again, is just a nice stone garden path. I think, again, that's from the Memphis Botanic Garden. So 2 examples from my garden. I started with just a bark mulch, which is something you just can order. You can buy it in bags. I ordered it from my local hardware company, and they dropped off 4 yards of bark mulch, and I put it on, and after a few rainstorms, it pretty much washes away. And the following year, I had to put in another set of bark mulch, and then we had Hurricane Irene, and it just washed everything out of the garden completely. I'm going to see who's not muted. One of you is not muted. If you could just check on that, that'd be great. And but after doing that for a number of years, I decided, you know what, maybe I'm ready to switch into something else. And I put in Riverstone in the garden, and it not only created a more permanent path, but it really kept the weeds down better. So I really like the change, and I like the way it looks. And you'll see another picture of how that looks in my garden. So you may start with one thing. The bark mulch was affordable and economical when I was first starting out. And then I got a load of stone, which I don't even remember how much it was. It wasn't that much, but it was probably more than my bark mulch. And so I changed it. And so again, it's like changing your house, it's changing your carpets, it's making those small changes that can really make a difference to your enjoyment and how much time you spend working in that garden. I thought this little this is from a little herb garden at Colonial Williamsburg. I thought it was cute to have a tiny little herb garden like that. And many of you I noticed have quite small yards, and so I thought you might be inspired by this little design. And I think most of the pathways that they use is crushed oyster shell, and I'm not sure where we get that. I don't know where I would get that in Vermont, but if you live near the ocean or you have a very good nursery next to you, it might be something that you would like to use, because it really is a nice contrast to have these different elements, the dark soil and the brick, and then some nice white oyster shells. And this is a garden up in Charlotte, Vermont, and I love the way it's lined with this wonderful fragrant lavender, and then the anise hyssop, and then these tall dramatic asparagus ferns. And then the focal point drawing your eye in is a big tub. You probably can't tell what that is, but it's a big planter of lettuce. But again, she uses all these different elements all at once. It may seem like a lot, but on a grand scale, but it's a really nice way to kind of focus the attention on the path and make it a more stable element. I love the design of this garden here. I guess that must be slate, some big pieces of slate, and they probably should be putting something along the edge of the garden so it doesn't seep into the pathway there. But I love the way this gardener has used the entrance into the garden to put all of their edibles rather than keeping it in the back and hidden or someplace behind the garage. They've put it right here in the front yard so that when they get out of the car and walk into the house, they can gather the lettuce and pick the peas. And this is wonderful ornamental radicchio and chicory here too. So don't be afraid to put your vegetables in the front yard on your front path if that's where you want to grow them. This is a very simple method of putting in a path. It's just straw. And you can buy it by the bale for $6 a bale, or you just go to your local farmer and throw it in the back of your car. And this particular garden has landscape cloth underneath it. And so the straw on top of it will keep not only the beds fairly moist, because well, it probably doesn't do too much for the beds, but the beds are a little bit elevated so that they hold the moisture, but it will keep the weeds down. And at the end of the season, it can just be scooped up and put on the compost pile. So it's not a lot of effort, and it's not a lot of expense, and it does the same thing as other path materials. So if you're not ready to put in stone or brick, it's a great option just for a starter garden. Another example of the hay, and this looks like it was freshly put down. It hasn't been matted down very much yet, and it will suppress the weeds. If you're using straw does not have seeds, but if you're using hay, you're more likely to have some problem with hay seeds growing up into the pathway. So do try and make that distinction when you purchase your bales. So the next step would be garden beds and the different variations on doing a garden bed. Garden beds determine if you prefer a raised bed or one that is flush with the ground. Square and rectangular shapes are easier to plant than round. And garden beds should be preferably 3 feet or no wider than your arm can reach. So if you put your arm out, you realize your arm is usually about 1.5 feet long. I have short arms, so mine probably aren't even that long. But when you can reach your arm in, then it avoids stepping in the center of the beds. That's the worst thing you can do for plants, is stepping in the garden bed, because it compacts the soil where their roots are. So any amount of smaller paths that you can put into the garden that you can use and is going to be better for your planting. This is another example of a garden at Colonial Williamsburg. You can see it's in the spring with all the beautiful flowering trees coming up. And one of the ways they do it, obviously, the old-fashioned way. And again, what we're talking about is there's the bed and it's a little bit elevated, and then the path in between. They're going to have to weed all that garden. But if they had some nice mulch down in between those beds, they wouldn't have to be weeding so much of it. It's very, I'm not terribly good at math, but I think if I added up how much path and how much garden bed they had, it would probably be 50-50. Whereas if you can design your garden so that you have less paths and more garden, you're going to be making out with a better ratio. The kitchen gardens at Colonial Williamsburg, there's so many different variations, and this was one that I found in my slides today when I was putting this together, because one of you has a garden that's quite extended. I think it has 3 different sections, and so I said, oh, this one will be really helpful for you, and we'll see it when we do the review, because I like the way that they've really created completely different gardens. This has a square center, and this one has a round center. And again, look at all those bricks. That's an awful lot of bricks to put in a garden, but they put them in 200 years ago and they're still there, and they keep the weeds down. So honestly, invest in bricks if you can. But again, I love the way it's edged those beds so that they're defined, but they're not raised. They still have a nice flush to the ground look to them versus something that would be a raised bed. Again, this is another example of the very simple edging along a beautiful little garden. This is also at Colonial Williamsburg. So some other options if you do like raised beds. We saw this, I think, in the first set of pictures, the wattle fencing. I don't think there's anybody in this class who would refuse wattle fencing. I think it's so charming. This is at the Chanticleer Garden, and they grow their own willows in a wet spot in the garden, and then cut the reeds in the spring and weave together these fences. And the wattle fence will probably last about 5 years, but it's a really nice decorative way to create a raised bed in the garden area. Another way to do a semi-raised bed is to really just dig it up and mound it. And this mounding is a very healthy way to grow gardens, because the roots have a much deeper way to get into the soil rather than just being flush to the ground. I find that sometimes with raised bed gardens, it's very hard to dig them, to turn that soil over. And it's really important in the spring when you're working with soil to be able to loosen up the soil so the roots and the plants can grow easily. And so it's one of the reasons I prefer doing this type of garden versus a boxed in raised bed garden. But raised bed gardens can also be decorative. They can be functional. They can be pretty much the only thing you can use if you have garden soil that's really not going to be cooperative, or if it's been some way tainted, or if you just don't really have the space. And so creating garden beds is with what different kinds of elements, such as this, which is a nice cedar plank, which will last a number of years, probably not forever, but it'll probably last 10 to 12 years. It's a nice thick cedar, and it's probably the only way you can create a garden that will have pointed edges. I know some of the garden designs that you created, it's nice on paper to create triangles, but in reality, to be able to buy materials to make a garden that's triangular could be a little more challenging. And I love the way this gardener here has taken nice raised beds. These are wonderful ones from the farmstead, and they're tongue and groove. I think I have another picture, and you can see how they fit together. And she's double hide them, so she's made them a double stack so that the lots of soil in these beds, so that she can grow something like asparagus. I think that's asparagus and peas, and everything has a nice deep root system. There's another example of it. You can see how they just fit together with this little peg. They come apart. There's a hole through there and they just come apart. And they sell them, these wonderful raised beds in different sizes, like 4x4s, 6x4s, 10x10s. You can get any shape that you want. But one of the things about raised beds that I've noticed in many people's gardens is that the way they stack them up is side by side. And sure, there's maybe 3 feet wide here, and that's ample amount to get in between. But when you're dealing with garden beds that are 4 feet wide and 6 feet long, it can look a little bit like a cemetery garden, especially when there's a little snow on top and you don't really know what's underneath those gardens. They look like little graveyard mounds instead of garden beds. And so I often say, if you are going to be doing a raised bed, to try and add some height. I want to show you some of this and some decorative elements, so it doesn't just look like a a sort of scary field of garden mounds. One of the gardens I designed for White Flower Farm used these types of beds, and rather than lining them up side by side, we did a little twisty, turny thing with them so that 2 were going one direction and 2 were going the other direction. And in the resources, you have a template for how these looks, and I'll show you again at the end. But trying to be creative with how your raised beds are designed in that space, and then adding height, such as a nice tutor in the center, or even just putting, these are tomato trellises, just adding different things where will be bamboo. However you can do it will really soften the edges and make it that much more interesting. And this is a great example of raised beds. They're not too high. They're probably a foot deep, and they are lined up side by side. But as you can see, since the gardener, and this is not my garden, it's a garden design in one of my books, but the gardener has softened those edges by adding containers and adding elements that are really pretty, like a little bird bath or even a watering can. And so it's not so apparent that they're just boxy little gardens. There's actually a lot going on in that garden space, including having a table and chairs and a place to sit out in the garden. So try and soften it up with all kinds of different decorative things, and that will really help create a more aesthetic garden if you have just boxes that you're working with. Another example of a little raised bed. This is a lovely little garden in New York State. And to me, it's so pretty. I've tried to sort of identify what it is about this garden that I like so much. And I like that in each one of the little squares, she has something that's special. She has a little time, whatever those things, I want to call it weather vane, but I can't think of what it's called at the moment. Sundial, there we go. And a bee scap and some beautiful old rock, and then a little rock there too, which forms a little bird bath. And then the colors are so pretty. And yet really most of this garden is empty, but your eye doesn't really focus on the empty parts. It just focuses on the pretty parts, I think, the beautiful foliage of the dianthus, and takes your eye to different spots. So when you can contain it in a nice way, it's kind of a distraction for the things that aren't working, leading you to more happier place with things that are working. This is the garden in Cornell, at the Cornell Botanic Garden, and I visited them in the fall, and I was so impressed because this is the herb garden, and many of these herbs were still in full bloom and very productive. And the only thing I could attribute it to is the fact that they're planted in these beds that are made out of pure stone, that 1 foot wide stone wall surrounding each one of these beds is holding in the heat. And so these gardens stayed hot and warm and thriving way into the fall, way longer than they really should have been. And I love the way they have created these little benches on the end. So if you have access to stone, if you like working with stone, if you have somebody that you know who's a mason, see if you consider building a wonderful stone garden bed, because it really, the plants will be very happy if you do. Another example of a stone garden bed. This is a garden in Northwest Connecticut. And this gardener told me, and I don't know, I guess it's true. She said they were taking up the sidewalks in her town and she noticed these beautiful pieces of granite that they used for edging the curbs and they didn't want them. And she said, just throw in my yard, I'll take them. And then she had a stonemason or a bulldozer come in and move them around so that she had this nice raised bed garden. And again, using that stone, it just heats up the soil so she can grow tomatoes and peppers and the crops that that are heat loving crops. She can get them in a little earlier in the spring and they'll extend a little later in the fall because that stone is working with the soil to keep it warm. This is Paige Dickey's garden in Northwest Connecticut, and I love everything Paige Dickey does. I love her books, I love her designs, and this is her kitchen garden. And she's got a lot of flowers in her kitchen garden, but she does grow vegetables. And notice her garden isn't really raised, but she has a nice edging. And I actually don't know, I'm going to have to ask her what it is, but it looks almost like a very fine bluestone edging around the perimeters of the garden. And then that's combined with the pea stone, which keeps it all very neat and tidy. And notice how she's planting along the short end of the garden rather than trying to do long rows. She's doing short rows because there's, she doesn't have to feed a whole crew of 8 people. She's just trying to feed a family of 4 or really just herself and her husband. And so she doesn't need a lot of lettuce. So she's making the most of a small space and then integrating it with a wonderful wild Malay of array of flowers, which I think is so pretty. Another example of the my garden, and I really like stepping into my garden, and I guess it's because I find that when I'm working with a garden that I consider to be standard garden rather than a raised bed garden, I can change the design a lot more. This is my spring garden, and then I'll plant it again probably in June and have a completely different crop in there. And then again in September, I'll put in a fall crop. And so when I'm working with my own garden, it's easier for me to come up with different shapes and designs. But when you're working with a very square raised bed garden, you're really working within a boxy shape. And so that's just one of the reasons I like to. But I also find it's easier to bend over. People say, oh, I have a raised bed garden because I have a bad back. Well, I don't think leaning into a garden is any better for a back than using your knees to go up and down. So really think about what you want for your garden bed and how you're going to actually interact with that and how it's going to be easier for you to get into the garden. This is another view of my garden, and I'm not embarrassed to say that I don't have very good edging around the outside. I just turned over the soil, but this year I'm actually going to be getting better edging. I do have metal, but it doesn't really show, but I'm not embarrassed to show you that I don't have a perfect garden. But this is what it looks like when things really start growing and the edges don't really matter. It just is this wonderful tapestry of green plants, and there's my bamboo poles with Malabar spinach growing up it, and this is probably a tomato plant, rhubarb here, kale, a squash plant. I jam everything into the beds, and I do kind of, last night's class we were talking about orderly chaos. I really think the plants thrive on an orderly chaos. As long as I have the structure of the garden, then the beds and whatever is growing in them can do whatever they darn well please. And this is the garden that I had right in the beginning that I was showing you. And this is Annie's garden. And if you remember Annie from the first class, I said she was my garden mentor. She's the one who really taught me so much about combining beautiful elements in a kitchen garden. And in this garden, the most obvious are these wonderful arches here that are made from cut green saplings, and they're wrapped around a piece of rebar. And then she has this Grandpa Ott's morning glory that will eventually make its way up and over. And notice she has one here, and then at this entrance, and then back there. And she doesn't have a formal small fence around the garden, but these create that lovely transition from the lawn into that garden area. And then she has a little tree house up here that she had used for when her children were little, and the kids could keep an eye on her when she was in the garden, and she could keep her eye on them, and it kept everybody within the same proximity so that she didn't have to worry about them. But in terms of the garden itself, what I find most enchanting is that she alternates crops. So she'll have calendula, and then she'll have some kind of a vegetable, and here's some lettuce and poppies and basil and beans and lettuce and flowers. So she alternates the food and the flowers right in the garden, which I think makes for a healthier flower garden and vegetable garden, because the pollinators are happy. When she goes out to harvest for dinner that night, she can bring in flowers for the vases at the same time. And everything, there's onions, and you can see it's just a beautiful, beautiful patchwork quilt of flowers and colors and delicious food. And then she has a bed here, which this is all of her raspberries. And then I think these are dahlias back here. And then the compost and the sunflowers are all way in the back. So this may be more garden than you would want to put in, but I think it's a really good illustration of how you can have it all. You just have to plan it to be that way. So we're going to do our first breakout session. We're going to ask Diane to break us into groups of 4. And I'd love for you to share with each other, what did you learn from your 5-year plan drawing? And what type of path material do you plan to use in your garden? And we're going to have 2 minutes each, and I'm going to join you. And all set?
No.
No, it never is.
We could be doing this for hours.
I know. Would anybody be willing to share something from their room, or that they'd like to share just on their own with the group, but what you learned?
I can say that a lot of it, well, everybody in our group was concerned about trees growing and considering how high the trees are going to be in 5 years and what kind of shade that's going to cast onto where we're choosing to put our gardens.
Interesting. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I learned, and I didn't get my team member's name. She's here. I have, anyway, I have a large oak tree that is dying, and it's right where we want to put the garden, and we're planning on taking it down. So I'm planning to use the mulch from that for the pathways. And she
good.
told me that mulch from new trees, from newly mulched trees. Is that right? Okay. It has allelopathic properties, and it keeps weeds at bay. But don't use them in your beds, use them in your pathways.
Yeah.
It keeps the growing of weeds and other things at bay. So
Interesting. That'll be nice if you can do that. That's wonderful. I mean, I
Yeah.
hate to see the tree come down, but
No.
nice to be able to recycle it.
Yes, just quickly, it has, I think, bacterial leaf scorch, but I was told if you take the branches off and don't let the foliage get in, then it's fine to use the trunk and the base.
Yeah,
And
nice.
I don't want to take up everyone's time.
No, it's good. No, it's good. This is about sharing. That's nice. One of the things I've seen people do is not take the tree down to the ground, but to leave some growing, so then you can put a climbing hydrangea on it or something like that, because insects love, tree trunks. So as high up as you can keep it, because oak trees are really beneficial for a huge host of different, I mean, not that it's going to be living anymore, but if you feel like that.
We've taken 2 and we use them to string a movie theater line across on part of our.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Woodpecker loves them.
Yeah. Does anybody else have anything you want to share? All right. I wanted to say that one of the things, and I'm just going to put this out there and then we'll talk more about it, but I've noticed a number of students in this class and the other class is that they don't have a permanent house and garden yet. You know, I mean, I was making the assumption that we're doing this 5-year plan and you've got this little yard out back and so on. But some of you are in, you know, either have a house that you haven't moved into, or you're using other people's, or you're renting and stuff like that. And so it's hard to sort of hypothesize what you want to do. And some people are stuck. They didn't do the homework because they're stuck. So I was suggesting that we pair up, that we create, that I actually just assign two people, you know, do a little matchmaking here. Unless there's somebody that you specifically resonate with, but maybe for the next couple classes, we'll set up a partnership so that you check in with each other, you help each other, saying, I'm really stuck with this design. Do you remember this picture that we saw that this might look nice, and something like that. So just, you know, sort of creating friendships within the group outside of class. So just putting it out there in case you want to do that. All right, so I'm going to keep going and keep talking. Are you learning something from this? Are these pictures good? Should I just be quiet and just roll through them, or it's okay to do my commentary? Okay, so closing this up. Okay, boundaries. What I mean by boundaries are fences. Sometimes we put fences up because we want to keep things out, but I like to think of fences as a way to keep things contained. When I was in art school, having a picture frame around the final picture meant that the picture was finished. And the same is true with the garden. And so sometimes people start with these big high fences, and I call them batting cages. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen these fences that are just, you know, they're saying, I'm keeping the deer out, and it just makes you feel like you're going into a prison rather than into a garden. So trying to create a fence or a boundary is a nice way of keeping things in rather than keeping things out. So I like to think of it as creating that transition between the garden and the lawn, and considering a low stone wall if you can, or a boxwood hedge, or a rustic split rail fence. And there's so many different, I have hundreds of pictures of fences, and I've had to just hone it down to just a few, and I'll show you some examples. But I'd love to do just a whole class just on fences, because I think it's a really important element that we tend to ignore. So the type of fence or border that fits your own garden style will serve as a barrier for rabbits and other small animals, or for privacy, but also it establishes that style that really represents who you are in terms of your garden design. And this is one that I like to start off with. This is a beautiful garden up in Charlotte, Vermont. And if it didn't have this little fence around it, it would probably look like a fairly ordinary, very abundant garden, but it wouldn't have that same cachet that I think it has when you see this lovely little gate and this latch. And so when the gardener lifts up that latch and it goes click, and she goes inside that garden, it's almost like going into a portal. It's like going into that sanctuary space. This gardener doesn't have any benches in her garden, which is a little frustrating to me, but she has the focal point here. We've talked a little bit about focal points, which is the strawberry trellis, and then these big these big frames for doing beans, runner beans and peas, and then sunflowers in the back. So the way she's kind of planted it is with low things in the front and medium things in the middle, and then high things in the back. And it's a way of structuring a layering system in the garden. So we'll talk about planting seeds and plants and how to put things in the garden. But while I have this on screen, I just thought you should see that the way she does it is she does a multitude of different things. In this one bed, she has cabbages and beets and onions all in the same bed, because they're all companion plants, whereas this is just all straight Brussels sprouts. But this garden fence is nothing fancy. It's just a straight cedar fence that she could get at the hardware store, and she's fancied it up a little bit with this lovely garden gate, but it works as a picture frame around this beautiful little space. This is my arborvitae. This is somebody you met earlier tonight. She's an indoor-outdoor cat. She loves prowling around. She doesn't catch birds, but she loves to look at them. But what I like about my arborvitae is it creates privacy. I'm on a main road. I'm right near a high school. I get a lot of traffic on my out on the front road during certain times of the day. But I also get kids who are running up and down, practicing, training, biking, walking, and sometimes they stand at the gate and they try and figure out what's inside that space. So it creates that lovely kind of intrigue and curiosity. And I beckon them to come in and come taste a tomato or look at the beans and come on in anytime. So it's not only privacy for me, but it also creates a lovely curiosity by those who are standing outside trying to figure out what's behind that big, tall arborvitae wall. More examples of fences. I love the way this gate is designed with it's high enough to keep the deer out, and yet it has this wonderful archway that beckons you into that space. And then this is a more urban garden, and they probably started with this lower one and found that wasn't keeping the deer out, so they added another layer to it. And it has a little bit of a batting cage feel to it. I think if I were designing this garden, I would allow a little more space between the edge of the garden and the fence. There's all kinds of reasons to do that, but I'm not going to get into them right now because we're really going to focus on the fence, but creating a prettier garden rather than just something that's just going to be some kind of a wire fence. But you can use wire if you have a split rail fence. It's nice to have wire built into it. This garden is the wire goes down underneath by about a foot so that the groundhogs and the rabbits can't get in. Of course, the squirrels will definitely be able to get in, and the deer can hop that fence if they wanted to. But it does create a little bit of a protection, and it also creates a great way to separate the flower garden from the vegetable garden. This is a garden in California where it's in my book, and I don't know the gardener, but it has a couple elements here that we've been talking about. Look how high these raised beds are. They're the highest raised beds that I have seen. They're probably very expensive to build and takes lots of soil, but this gardener doesn't have to lean over to harvest his beautiful red cabbage. But what I love about this is he's also combined a wonderful gate and an arbor. This is grapes growing over the top of the arbor, and notice here there's the hardware cloth, so it gives the illusion that it's open, but yet it still has a way to create the barrier from the deer getting into that garden space. Another example of Paige Dickey's garden, and I guess she doesn't have trouble with deer because they could hop right over that. But I love the way she's lined up her gates on either end of that garden and has a focal point of this wonderful old little pedestal, which probably it's either a bird bath or it has a sundial on it. And again, she's trying to keep things out. This isn't going to keep out voles or moles or rabbits or anything really, but it keeps her dogs out, which is maybe all she cares about. Again, noticing the chicken wire sort of embedded in the fence area there, and this gate is a garden at Chanticleer Garden, and I love the focal point at the end, which is this wonderful archway, which is made with living willows. And the way this gate also has a sweet little latch on it, and these fun ornamental trellises that were built by one of the gardeners that grow the sweet peas. They add a nice bit of height and drama into that garden space. I don't think you can see, but this path is mulched with pine needles. It's a big thing in the South. They use, I guess they can get truckloads of pine needles. I guess you're in the South, so you can probably get the same thing, and it's something I hadn't really shown, but I think it's a beautiful way of mulching the garden beds. I think it creates a little acidity, but you're not putting them in the beds, you're just keeping them in the pathways. Oh gosh, I guess I'm stuck on Sturbridge, not Sturbridge Village, on Colonial Williamsburg, because I'm showing you more pictures of that. But I like the way this garden has these little rails, and I'm sure it's just to make sure that pedestrians don't step into the garden. But this wonderful rail has, I think this is one of the oldest espaliered trees, and I don't remember what it is. If it's a peach, it couldn't be a peach tree. I can't remember what it is. It's been so long since I've been there, but I love the way they've used it as part of the fence around this lovely little contained garden area. This is one of my favorite gardeners in New Hampshire. She and her husband are in their 80s, and they have been creating these gardens. And I'm just showing you one little snippet of a really large area. They live off the grid, and they just can't stop creating gardens. And this is the more formal garden of all of them. And I love the way they've put this simple fence around it. And notice they have an entrance and an exit on all four sides. So they have complete access, again, with a sundial as a focal point and more boxwood. But I wanted you to see this inset that really they're not attached to anything, but by having that little blue triangular glass dome on the top of those posts gives it a little bit more elegance than if they were just regular posts. And I like the color and the way that the sun shines through it. So just something simple like that can add just a little enhancement to an ordinary garden. And this is a very practical garden. I like the way they have their harvest baskets right there, just hanging them up right by the front, you know, instead of having to have to go to the garden shed to get them or something. And then this fence that goes into the garden at sort of an angle. It's not on a direct side. And again, using the hardware cloth to keep whatever rodents they can out of the garden. And this is a garden near me here in Manchester, and it's a gorgeous 40 acres of ornamental gardens, and then they have 2 kitchen gardens. And this is the view looking at the Green Mountain Range. And I love the way they've set this gate up. It's rather grandiose, but every time I look at it, it reminds me of that wonderful book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where the kids go through the wardrobe and they walk into the portal that goes through into Narnia. And that's how I feel when I walk in under this. So if you can create a wonderful portal into your garden, it will really give you that sense of sanctuary and that sense that you're leaving behind the troubles of the world and going into that secret space that is your happy place. So we're going to do one more breakout session. I'd love to hear what has inspired you from these garden photos, the things that you might like to use in the garden designs that you're going to be working on this week. And since seed catalogs are coming our way, what new plants are you thinking you may grow this year? Let's stick to edibles rather than daffodils and ornamentals, but you know, in our next class, we're going to be talking about seeds and plants and catalogs. So we are going to be thinking about all kinds of different things we can grow. So we're going to get 2 minutes each, since we've been going for an hour and 15 minutes. If you need a 2-minute break to get a glass of water or something to eat, you'll have that. Diane, take it away. Anybody want to share?
I'll share.
Okay.
I realized that, and I totally forgot that people garden in the city. But one of our group members has a long, narrow garden in the city, and that presents its own challenges. But it's really cool to try to come up with ways to create more space, you know, through winding paths and elevating things. And she's got a chain link fence that she can use to grow both food crops and beautiful things up. And just seeing how other people are doing it. Because I have an acre that I'm on, which is good and bad because it's almost too big for doing it all at once. but I have space that I can play with. But when you have a smaller space, it kind of gives you a bigger challenge to see what you can do with the space.
That's nice. That's nice. Well, that is a wonderful way to introduce what Adrienne was sharing with us about these urban foodscapes that she is aware of. She's from outside of Flint, Michigan. And she was talking about, maybe you could share a little bit about that, Adrienne, because I guess what I want to say in advance is that, you know, as gardeners, we're inspired by other gardeners. I get my best ideas from other gardeners, and we have come so far in terms of really putting growing food on a pedestal. I mean, the fact that this class is popular, I couldn't have sold this class 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I mean, people just didn't really want to grow food. Oh, I can buy food. I don't need food. But we have really come so far in terms of valuing the food that we grow. And I was saying that 20 years ago, I was in Boston at a meeting with a whole bunch of chefs and other people, and I was noticing that there were just marigolds and flowers planted around the city. And I mentioned to somebody, why aren't they growing tomatoes? Why aren't they growing chard? Why aren't they growing food crops? And the response was, well, because people would eat it. Well, isn't that what we want? So, you know, just remembering that our actions, we're inspiring each other, but we're also inspiring other gardeners to grow whatever we can, and making food beautiful is really such a gift. So anyways, Adrienne, do you want to share what you were saying about along those lines? Oh, you even brought it up on a screen. You're very clever. You can do that. You're muted.
Oh, I'm so sorry about being muted. Yep. So this was an initiative, I believe, that was started by the Chamber of Commerce and the mayor. So they have the Beautification Project, Chamber of Commerce, Downtown Development Authority, and the City of Durand's Beautification Committee, and it was the Edible Landscaping Project. And so they wanted to, increase relationships with neighbors, promote healthy eating. And this is in the really first early years. And so they actually, I believe, created a 501c3, and they got a group of neighbors just coming together and just planting all over the community beautiful landscapes of peppers and tomatoes and squash and corn. And it was just, and fruit trees too, all across the city for the residents to enjoy. And just taking over different plots of land. But I thought it was like so cool that, like the second phase could be everything that we're learning in class, where we can actually create just the aesthetic and inviting spaces rather than planting a squash here, planting a pepper here. How does it incorporate with like a city design? But like, I know this is happening in other communities. So this is like, I mean, you just go through the community and you just see rows of squash, rows of corn, and it's all free for the taking. But it's so cool to be able to just pick fresh veggies off the vine and then take it back home to cook for dinner for your family. Um, and so I just wanted to share like a town that's close to me. They ripped out all the flowers, really. I mean, or the flowers that died, and they just planted kale all the way across, right? And you can just pick it as you're walking on your walk. I just think it's the coolest thing.
Mm.
Um,
I love that idea. We need to start a revolution, of edible garden revolution.
yeah.
Ready for it. I know. Well, anyways, it just thrills me to realize how far we've come in terms of creating bounty. I have to say it's not. When I was in California, I was in Santa Cruz, and I was walking by this wall of kiwis. There were kiwis hanging off. The kiwis, figs. It was figs hanging off all over. And I said to my son, "My God, look at all these figs." And he said, "Mom, that's not the kind of fig you can eat." And he looked it up, and there's different kinds of figs. There's an ornamental fig, and then there's an edible fig. And apparently, if you eat the ornamental ones, you can get sick. So I think there's still a little bit of education that we need to do around food and what you can eat and what you can grow. But yeah, I think we should start trying to make some inroads. Maybe just like Anne, I'm talking to you now. We should plant in front of the library green
Well,
chard and
yeah.
kale and with a big sign that says edible, take it home.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so, at the library, we have this garden that we grew all these tomatoes last year, and like nobody knew that you could just go and pick them.
That's because it
Until
was so
the
far
end of
away.
until the end of the summer, it was up by the,
Yeah.
cemetery. And
Yeah.
but the other thing that I'm looking at right now is urban gardening, particularly in New York City. And it's a huge, has had support for over 30 years. And I'm actually working with a nonprofit in Harlem, a youth development organization that, and they have a fabulous garden, and I'm going, and they have a kitchen, and they're doing really cool stuff. So I'm kind of like learning this class and then going there. And there, during COVID, this organization helped feed the community.
Nice.
So it's amazing. And I think it's going on all over the country.
I know. So it's taking care of our own yards and then inspiring others and educating others. Take it out from beyond here. All right. Well, for more discussion, I'm going to keep going because I'm always worried I'm going to run out of time. But good work, everybody. I forget what's in my show here, but I guess, so we're not going to talk about plant materials this time because we're going to talk next time about plant materials. I'll be sending out little notes to you about how to sort of start collecting lists and what to grow. But we'll talk about that next time. But this class, we're going to wrap up with personal touches. How do you include benches for relaxing and tables for eating and a trellis for arbors and garden art that makes you smile? Again, these are things that would be nice if we can set them up in urban areas to have in the parks and the places where people like to sit, to actually have areas where they can eat strawberries and pick tomatoes. And that garden at the library that's too far away, it's up on the hill, bring it down closer to where people see it and really encourage people to touch their food. It's amazing how many kids have no idea how food is grown. And isn't it wonderful that the edible schoolyard that Alice Waters started has really taken off? Much more we can do. So remember to have fun in your garden and enjoy the beauty and the magic that happens when you connect to the food you grow and your edible landscape. And, take that word work out of it and just turn it into play and the different things that you can add. This is a bench. It looks like a Henry Moore sculpture to me, but it's probably a piece of driftwood that somebody found and turned into a bench. I really encourage benches in your gardens. It's very important to make sure that you do take the time to sit and really appreciate what is going on in the world around you. And having a water feature, something that's a bubbling fountain, or even just a bird bath. This bird bath on the right is from Gordon Haywood's garden. He has wonderful open days tours a couple of times during the summer, and I love the way he decorates his bird baths with flowers and singing frogs. And the garden here on the left-hand side is from Hollister House Garden. And having a water feature is that one thing that I'm going to add to my garden this year. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do it, but I'm determined to get a water feature in. Water is really important for pollinators, for birds, as a bird bath, as a place for bees to land and drink, for hummingbirds, for all kinds of, everybody needs water. So adding that to your garden is not only visually pretty, but it's really beneficial. Something like an old watering can. I love this old watering can that I saw in somebody's garden, and it reminded me that I have an old watering can that was my grandmother's, but I haven't used it because it has a hole in it, and I don't know where to take it to fix it. But I just the very sight of a watering can, now we're using hoses, all kinds of crazy flexible hoses and sometimes drip irrigation as well. But once upon a time, before we had rubber hoses and other contraptions, we would have to water the garden with watering cans. So I love the different shapes of watering cans. I understand there's a museum in England somewhere that is a watering can museum, and I I hope to get there sometime because I'm a big fan of watering cans. Look at the way this beautiful fence. We saw lots of fences in different colors. This one is a Benjamin Moore color, and again, just the way it picks up all the colors of the plants around it. So don't be afraid of color and painting your fences, and don't be afraid of putting things in there that don't make any sense at all. If you see a piece of artwork and you would like to put it in your garden, please do. You know, it makes people smile. It makes people kind of warm up to that idea that gardens are not just a place to grow food, but they're a place to enjoy, to sit a while, to stay there. And I always set up little treasure hunts in my garden. When I have my grandkids come to visit, I have this whole stash of little rubber frogs that I hide all over the place because it engages them. They're not just walking through the garden, but they're lifting up the leaves. They're plucking cherry tomatoes. They're looking under stones. It trains them to look in places that they might not look. One thing I did in the early years of my garden is I took regular bamboo and I painted it. It's not a nice Benjamin Moore color. It's just a spray can color of this iridescent green, and I just love the way it set off the green in the garden. I think I might try it again this year. I might use red or some other color because it's just a little different, and when I had all that brown mulch, everything just felt kind of brown. So it's a nice way to add a spark of color. And this garden here, this is a wonderful little sculpture right in the center. So here she's got the little raised beds and then this little raised center area and then a focal point and a nice dark green, sage green fence around the edges. So color in whatever art form you can get it into the garden always adds a nice element. I love this twig trellis. We saw that in the garden with the clematis, which is in the background there. And this twig, I can't do my R's and my W's, so I'm being very careful. Twig trellis is handmade, and it's probably not going to last forever, but it creates that focal point. So try and find something that is very eye-catching and engaging that you can put in the center or at the far end of the garden that will draw your eye into that space. And it's not planted with anything particular. I think this is just some kind of wild onion or even a daylily or something. It's surrounded by lemon thyme, but it draws your eye away from the things that are maybe not so perfect in the garden. This is my little back garden. This is my sweet spot with my old apple tree and my garden bench, and I love to sit in this spot. I mentioned that sweet spot, and some of you drew it into your garden designs, and some of you maybe don't know where it is just yet, but to me, it's that place where magic happens, and when I'm feeling that I just need a little time for a quiet meditation, this is where I go. And so having benches around your garden, I have about 5 different benches in my garden, and I only have a 1/4 acre, so that's kind of a high percentage of benches to acreage. This is not my garden here. I don't even know where that is. I think that's actually Hollister House Garden, but this is my garden in the first year, and this is the Dolchis Lab, the hyacinth bean growing up on the south side of the fence. That's the most magnificent plant. I'll be talking about that in the next class because I'd love to encourage you all to try growing it. And little areas where you can just go and sit. This is that circular bench is a nice way to have a view from all sides, and then having a little area where you can have a little breakfast nook, and just finding places to put as many benches as you can into your garden will really allow you to have different perspectives and different places to view your garden. Now, we haven't talked much about cold frames, and again, we'll probably talk more about that in the next garden, but integrating a greenhouse or cold frames into your garden is really important. It extends the season. This is the Chicago Botanic Garden on the left-hand side, and she's doing some trial gardens with, I don't know what that is, a tatsoi or mizuna or some kind of mustard green. The garden on the right-hand side show my 2 cold frames that I bought off of Etsy actually and put them together as a kit. And I use them in the spring for seed starting, and then I use them in the fall for season extending. I put in a crop of spinach and mosh and some winter density lettuce, and I can grow salad greens late into the fall. So just remembering to put things in your garden that are fun. This is a garden down at in the Burpee Trial Gardens, and I thought it was pretty atrocious because the whole garden is really out of control. But those funny urns there somehow take your eye off the garden, and the way they're set at an angle is kind of amusing. But this is one of my favorite things that I saw once at Longwood Gardens in the children garden. I have I don't know if they still do this or not, but I love the way that they've created this little sunflower house so kids can go out with their friends, or parents can go out with their spouses and sit and have a lovely cup of tea or some lemonade in a sunflower house. And remember to have whimsy. This woman, Jan, was somebody who I guess you could call her a hoarder in some ways. I love Jan. She ended up having an antique store because she collected so many things. And a lot of those things ended up in her garden. That wonderful chandelier. I don't know where she found it or what she did with it or how long it was in the garden, but every time I went to visit her garden, she'd have something else in the garden, and it always made me smile. And I think that's really where I learned about how important it is to smile in the garden. We get a little serious sometimes when we go out and work in the garden. We've got weeds, we've got work to do, we've only got a certain amount of time. Let's get this done. Where Jan reminded me that gardens are really about places to enjoy and to just have fun in them. And this is not Jan's garden. This is a garden in Connecticut, but bird houses and bird baths always add a nice touch. Again, at Colonial Williamsburg, I adore these glass cloches. I think that you'll never find those anyplace, but if you happen to have some you find some in your grandmother's garden, bring them out. This is the gardener, I think it's Wesley, I can't remember his last name. He's no longer there, but he was the gardener at in the historic gardens, and he's taking these beeskeps, or he just took these glass things off of these cabbages, which he was blanching over the winter. And those beeskeps are so wonderful. So if you have these old things, you can use them for a function, or you can just use them for ornamental purposes as well. They do a lot of trellising in Colonial Williamsburg. They cut these water spouts off of all the fruit trees, and then they use them for trellises for peas and beans. And this is just a picture I got off the internet of different ways that you can build trellises. So you can do them with bamboo, or you can do them with water spouts that you've cut off from pruning trees, or from, sometimes there's a thing called pollarding trees, which they do a lot in Europe, and they have all of these wonderful flexible sticks that they can use for other purposes as well. So I'm going to start with your homework. And this is what I've suggested you do. You can certainly go whatever way you want on your homework, but I'd like you to draw the designs for your small garden area 3 different ways. And the reason this is important is because I know many of you came up with a design and you like it and it's in place, and that is what you want to use. And that is fine. But if you would like to keep experimenting by trying different designs, I'd love for you to try that first one, which is generally the practical design. That's the one that you maybe just did a 4-square design because that's what I encouraged in the first class. But then I'd like you to try a wild and artistic design, maybe taking that 4-square and turning it into a triangle, or putting a zigzaggy path through it. I think it's a kind of a combination of your right brain and your left brain, because the third design you'll do might be a combination of the two. And you don't have to do this, but I find when I'm doing designs for people, I always start with a practical design, then I come up with something that probably won't work at all because it's too way off. But then the third design is the one that's the most interesting. It's the one that we generally choose to try and use in that design. So some of you might notice in the notes that I wrote to you that just keep an open mind and see if you can rearrange things a little bit to give it just a little bit more of a twist and in the aesthetic qualities. And then using whichever design you have. If you haven't decided on a design, you can use the templates that are provided, and then mark out a few of the elements of style that we talked about in today's class. And just keep playing with your design. You know, I think some of you did a great job with that first design and you know exactly what you want to do. I would just like you to encourage you to just keep trying different angles and different aspects. We've got another few weeks and I'm here to keep working with you on your design. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but just see what you can come up with because you might surprise yourself with something completely unusual. So when I'm talking about playing with the templates, these are the templates that are provided in the resources tab. So figure out where your garden bench is going to be, or where you're going to put a bird house, or where that bird bath is going to go, and how you're going to put in that archway to make that portal into the garden, or some way that you can create a lovely ornamental fence or even a cold frame, or creating, if this is the design for the raised bed gardens, when there's, instead of just lining them all up like a cemetery garden in a straight row, maybe turning them a little bit so they make more of a maze kind of style, and where you're going to put that bench, and do like Jan does, find some things that maybe are in your basement or your attic or in an antique store and stick them in the garden, and don't care that they don't really make any sense at all, because if they make you smile, that's where they should be. And so these are the things that I'm hoping that you can start incorporating into your small design, with figuring out a gate and a fence, a focal point, table and chairs, how your garden shed is going to fit into that space, and just keep playing with some of these designs that we've been looking at today. And once you lock in a design, if you find something that maybe you didn't design, that somebody else designed, you can copy it. You can borrow ideas, because there's no such thing as a original idea really when it comes to art. So find a design and make it your own. And so I'm going to end this lesson, and we're going to fold right into looking at your designs. Let me see if I can get this up.
The question really quickly, where are the resources? Where's the resource tab?
I don't know. Do we look at Longwood Gardens and see where it is? Diane, do you know?
I'm poking around. I just didn't see it. That's okay. I'll find.
Yes, it is, so you should have received a email from MLS Help at longwoodgardens.org, and that has how to access what Ellen is looking at. And that's basically our online platform, and that's where all the assignments, all the resources are. So you should have received an email from them. If you didn't, I will make a note of it, and they can resend that to you.
So so what I did is I went can you see my screen? I don't know if you can see or not.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so then in this class, Elements of Style, these are the resources here. This is the actual PDF that we just looked at.
Oh,
This,
okay.
the
Got it.
template, the template, the template, the template.
Oh, I see. Okay, sorry. Got it.
No, that's okay. I actually didn't know either, because I haven't actually been into that, but that's what that's what it would be. Yeah, you unmute everybody if you want to, because what I would like to do is go through each one of we only have like half an hour, and we have 20 different slides to go through. And so if you're okay letting me show your slides, and they're no in particular order, I think a lot of questions can be answered in this set of designs, but so keep asking, but I'd also like to get your input, I guess is what I'm saying. I'd love for you to make suggestions of things if somebody has a question. So what I'm going to do, the format for this is I'm going to ask if Teresa is, I don't think I spelled your name right. I'm sorry, I forgot the H. Teresa, are you here?
Yep, no, you spelled it right.
Oh, good. Okay, great. So I would love for you to share with us what you have in mind here and what your thought process was, and then maybe some ways that you might be evolving it as you go.
Yeah, so I'm trying to put in a kitchen garden, more of an herb garden in front. So in the rear of my house, it's all fenced off, which I have a vegetable garden back there, which I might also try to make nicer looking because it's more utility than pretty. But for this one, it's going to be on the side of the house because we get blazing hot southern exposure. You can't walk through it. It's just too stinking hot. So on the farthest side, I would like to put trees in, but then within that tree to house area on the south side of the house, put the herb garden in. But I have deer, so it can only be like herbs and onions. And I'm not allowed to grow in front of my house.
Ooh.
I loved what you guys were saying about the towns that are doing this, but in my borough, it's technically illegal to grow food
Oh,
in front of your house. So I'm trying to sneak it in so that if I can make it pretty and I don't have too much like sticks or I don't know. I'm just trying to sneak it in somehow.
yeah. Interesting. Interesting. So tell me, where in this design is your garden? I don't
Right
know.
there, right where your mouse is.
Right here.
Be right behind that. And yeah, right there.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yes, because I did have, wait, let me see if I have another one of yours. I might not have. Nope, I didn't put in two, but you did submit something that showed that and I didn't get it.
Yeah,
Not. Great. So you're sticking with the 4 square because you like it?
I do like it. I might try and do a curved path.
Okay.
But I'm trying to keep the grass cutting easier in front of the house because I don't know, I just want to keep the grass cutting easier.
So your path is grass.
Yeah.
Nice. And so you'll put up some kind of edging so the grass doesn't grow into the beds.
I was thinking about edging it out in lavender. That's the purple.
Oh, look at that. Okay, everybody. Isn't that beautiful? That would be so, I love it. I love it. Well, that's great. Good. So I guess your assignment for this week is to just keep playing with how you're going to be planting these beds and how you maybe create. So this is a shape that I have in my garden, and the biggest problem I have is the auxiliary because these are like 4 feet. I mean, how do you step into that garden?
No idea.
Okay, so that's your challenge for this week. Figure out how to do it. Maybe you put a little auxiliary path here that breaks it up. That's what I sometimes do.
Okay.
And how that's going to be, if it's going to be a stone or if it's going to be a board or hay or however you want to do it. Because all of these designs that we're doing on paper look great, but in reality, we have to make them actually work for us. That's good. All right. Good work, Teresa. I'm going to keep going here so we don't run out of time. Does anybody else want to make a comment? All right. Well, I like the way you did all this. You put your compass. You did everything that was necessary to get to this. So great job.
Yeah.
Catherine, you going to say something?
I was just saying, yeah, great job.
Okay, good. See, we all need to have praise. Good. Anna Lee, are you with us tonight?
Yes, I'm right here.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
So I love the way you included this. So Annalee, this is because you have trouble with deer and stuff. So this is you want to explain what you have here?
Yeah, so I am blessed with a lot of land. I am turning the front of my house. My house sits on the back of my land. And so the entire front of our house is lawn right now. And I'm slowly chipping away at turning those into very, very big native planting beds. So I'm not going to put a food garden up there. And also food gardening for me, it's kind of like very utilitarian. I like it to be pretty, but I have little kids and sometimes, like we leave tools around because, you're always digging and watering and the hose is out and you don't always pull the hose reel back in. And so I'm putting it in the back of the house where my kids' playground is. It's already a leveled, mulched area. Where it says mulched walkway, I won't have to mulch it. I'm just putting the structure on there. We do have a ton of deer because we're rural. And I'm not always great about putting the deer scram out when it rains at like 4 o'clock in the morning, because that's when they hit. So I thought I'm just going to buy a really big chicken coop, because it has the wire fencing in between the poles, and the top is covered too. So the mesh goes all over the top, so we won't have birds or squirrels coming in and pecking at like a single peck at a strawberry. It's like you get that one perfect strawberry, and it's got one little bite out of it. So we were like, how do we keep the food safe, but keep it all open so pollinators can get in? So this is what I came up with the smaller beds on the exterior that's going to have Mediterranean herbs, chives, basil, things like that. And on the inside is where all the yummy stuff's going to be, like cucumbers, tomatoes, berries. And it's pretty open. So even though, I have the cardinal directions on there, there's not, it's far enough away from the house and of our tree line that it still gets a good bit of sun throughout the day. I know it's not the most beautiful garden, but it's what's gonna actually end up. Now, if I were to design, if you give us the parameters to design anything, I could go nuts. I would do like a spiral garden, like, maybe with a seating space in the middle of the spiral, and then it just spirals out, and, you know, I don't know.
Well, I'm intrigued by this because you're not putting a fence up. It's not, you've explained what your challenges are. And, using the elements of style that we talked about today, you can grow some wonderful vines up the entranceway. You can get your bench in there. There's things you can do to make it more beautiful. I think it's intriguing.
Yeah, and the nice thing is it's right next to my shed. I have like storage space underneath our house, and my shed is over to the right, maybe 40 feet off the door. I didn't understand, I'm sorry, this is my fault. The big picture, small picture, I guess the big picture would have been an aerial view of my house and my plot, and then where this would go in relation to everything. But that was my mistake, because I got confused.
You did fine. You did great. You did great. And
Thank you.
again, I just think it's so wonderful that everybody did something a little different, and you did what you needed to do to figure it out. So, yeah, just keep figuring out how to make it more beautiful.
Sure, thank you.
I'm going to keep going here. Eve, are you with us tonight? Eve, are you here? Okay, I don't know. Somebody said they weren't going to be coming, but I'll just sort of show Eve's, and maybe when she comes back and watches this on. But she did the big picture, the garage, the north is that way. Notice what I said, driveways and garages are always on the south for whatever reason, but that looks like it's the case. And she did a good job of drawing the giant trees, the breezeway, the deck. So she did her overview here. And then this is what she used with tracing paper to go over it, which I think is wonderful. She has it looks like she really went wild. Some fruit trees over here. I can't see what that says. Fire pit, secret hammock corner. Doesn't that look inviting and wonderful? So I really love how she designed this. And then here's where the kitchen garden area is going to be. And I thought it was interesting because it sort of looks like my garden, it's sort of about the same shape with the house and the driveway over the, actually she has the driveway this way, mine's over there. But it's a great example of just simply going, taking the basic and going into the vision, which I think is good. So Eve, good job. Keep going. Looks lovely. Gwen, are you here? I think you are.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, great. All right, I had fun looking at yours. It took me a while because Gwen included some photographs and of the front of the house and the back of the house. And at first I thought this was yours with a swimming pool, and I was going, wow. But that's what you're trying to block out over there, right?
Yeah.
So do you want to share? I have two sets of yours. I have this and I have that. So do you want to share your design process?
Yeah, so I live in Northeast Philly, and I'm blessed to have any yard at all. It's very uncommon, and that my property backs up to SEPTA train lines, which the trains are like down a 15, 20-foot bank. So we do hear them, but we don't see them, and we benefit from unkept but mature tree cover and some extended green space behind. So it feels like you've stepped out of the city a little bit, which is nice. If you stood in my yard and looked either direction, you would just see yard, 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 yard for all my neighbors down. And we all have the same little backyard strip, typically separated by some, version of a chain link fence about mine. So when I've been here 3 years, and when we moved in, they're like the back, no one had cared about doing anything with the yard for years and years. So nice blank canvas, but also a lot of work and challenge to envision what you do with so much blank canvas. So it's been very much a work in progress. And this is this year, I'm playing more around with the idea of like, incorporating more style than just like a function of like I have a couple raised beds, and as I've outgrown, I just want to grow too many things, so more and more things have found themselves just interplanted with the flower beds, which just for desire to have something but for lack of really time or initiative to do anything more, just started out as just strip flower beds along the edge. So this class has been a fun opportunity to holistically think about how I want to experience my space, to consider how to subdivide the yard into different rooms. And I've tried it, and then to take a more stylistic approach to my kitchen garden rather than kind of just whatever it happens to be, so I can get all of the things growing that I want to grow. So if you look at, maybe the next next slide would be the better one for my next comment. Yeah, so on the left, you see like the full length of my yard. At the very bottom of the photo is my house and a concrete slab. That is the only real thing, except for the shed in the back, that is existing now. The rest of that design is all idea. I want to expand our patio area. So coming off of the existing concrete pad, there'll be a flagstone or like a mixed stone patio area, and next to it kind of like a winding yard strip of about like 6 feet or so, that as it winds around, it ends up like you walk through what will be the kitchen garden and then into the back, which is a fire pit on the left side of the back half, and then a little hammock corner nook on the other side. So I'm hoping it will kind of serve to break up the yard, to create a little bit of sense of different rooms. And then with vertical elements between, I want to put in a couple of trees, some different shrubs, some just like feature pieces or trellises to create some of the hidden nature, the mystery or the surprise as you go around different corners, whatever. And then
what is this area here? What is going on here?
So if I zoomed into the center of my yard, this would be the kitchen garden. The gray are flagstones or stepping stones.
Okay.
So I tried to take, I don't have the space to do the design, like a kitchen garden designs that were shown, where it's more like it's got a central focal point and then kind of breaks off in some structure around it. So I almost did it the opposite way, where the kitchen garden is on either side of my yard, and it kind of mirrors itself in the sense that it, on the low end of the screen, there's going to be 2 raised beds that have tomatoes, because groundhogs will eat mine. I don't have deer, but I have groundhogs. And then on the other side, there'll be 2 trellises, and then the blue are containers. The brown color is like trellises or features, like built-in elements. So yeah, but so the gray is just stepping stone or flagstone, or just stones.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued by it. I love the shape of it. In my notes to you, I said, in this class, I'm going to ask you to come up with some different ways of doing things
Mhm.
with it. And one of the things that comes to my mind is maybe creating an archway here so that it actually does separate. Maybe you put in what they call the cattle, that cattle stuff, so you can have hanging gourds and things, some way
Yeah,
to create a portal into that other space. I like the idea that you're
I
trying
like
to
that idea.
create two separate rooms. And I'd love to see a focal point here too, like maybe a bench over here. Maybe this fire pit isn't off to the left. Maybe it's here and you have a circular bench so that you're actually walking in here and you see that fire pit area. And also the way you have the garden just sort of shoved off on the side, I think you can use it more around your fire pit if you wanted to, and maybe have the circular area and that to have. I like your shapes that you're working with. I'd love for you to just really go a little more wild on the possibilities
Okay.
of that space. But I think you're smart to break it up because it's an awfully long space. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I have a thought, if that's okay. I think this is fantastic. I was thinking exactly the same thing, that you could have a structure separating the two rooms. And I was thinking like one of those, I mean, if the budget fits, one of those really big moon gates, that would be so awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because it really feels like when you walk from one space to another, when you go through something circular like that, it just feels like you're going through a portal through, to
Mm,
Narnia or somewhere else.
Hmm.
yeah. I
Cool.
mean, Gwen, I was even thinking you don't have to, I mean, you don't have to leave it open either. If you actually had your garden space in this, using this area, then you can use a path through there that's only going to be maybe 3 feet wide, and you're still getting that much more because you're leaving an awful lot of room there.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, there's lots of things. I don't know. I'm tempted to get tracing paper out myself and play with this because there's something about it that I just think there's so much potential here. It's great. I love the fact that you have a patio and a shed. Those are your two solid things. I love the idea you want to put in some trees because of course that would be, well, I would put in trees to block off your neighbor's swimming pool area
Mm-hmm.
a bit
Yeah,
more.
my only thought with that is I grew up with a pool that had trees overhanging it, and it is so annoying having to fish out
Ooh, good
trees all the time.
point.
So I didn't want to do that to my neighbors.
Yeah. But yeah, even if you take, I like this line, even if you take that line and as I say, just play with it. But you can incorporate your garden in more of this area and just have pathways going through it. Because this feels like it's cutting it off a little bit too much. You could bring it,
Yeah.
bring it along like that if you wanted to. Or even, just even put it back here if you wanted to and have the portal here into that garden area and bring that fire pit up to here. Just as I said, just really think outside the box. Just keep pushing the creative pieces together. But it's fun. It's nice. I look forward to what you come up with next week. It's good. All right. I'm going to keep moving on here. Good job, Gwen. Nicely done. Kristen, I'm so in love with this little house. Are you here still?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, the house it's gonna be all black, but it's under construction right now. So,
Yeah.
and it's like 50 miles away, so I just had to go off of a photo that I already had in my phone. And my challenge with the property is that right now I don't have any boundaries to work within. It's just a big open piece of land and it's sloped. Like the trees from behind there, it just, it gently slopes down, and where I'm standing, there's a creek behind me. So I don't even know where I want to put the garden yet because like all the grading isn't even finished. Like there's still heavy machinery to come in and a
Yep.
well. So I did sketch out like the property, and where the big X is where I'm thinking of putting the kitchen garden just because it has good sun exposure and it's a relatively flat area of the slope, so I don't think I would have to do too much hardscaping. But all the little dots around on the right side of that paper are this like big food forest that we got a grant for and planted like 300 trees there.
Oh,
So I have to work with that too. The trees are little, so they're still able to be moved. Like they're only 2 or 3 years old. So if I need to pop a few out and put them somewhere else, I can. So I just feel like I just don't, I couldn't get the level of detail that a lot of people seem to have done because I don't even know where it's going yet. So I feel like I'm like 3 classes behind.
oh, you're
Um,
doing great. You're doing great. So just give to other people an idea that you're building this house.
Yeah, it's just a little house. It's only like 600 square feet, so it's like a cabin really. But it's overlooking a creek, and it's on about 4 acres, and half of it's wooded, but then 2 are open field. And so where the X is also, I was thinking about irrigation because there's not really a space to have the garden right next to the cabin because there's slopes and there's trees, and it just wouldn't really work there. So where the X is where the well is going in too, so I could get a garden hydrant installed because I was thinking, how the hell am I going to water this? Like, without dragging like 100-foot hose from the cabin. So that's kind of the area that makes sense, and there's a flat enough space I can put a little mini greenhouse or a hoop house or something. So I feel like that's where I want to do, and all the deer come off of that hillside to come down and eat everywhere. So there's just like a lot of factors I'm dealing with. But I'm hoping to go up there this weekend and get like better pictures. And I did hire a local photographer to come out and do an aerial shot of the land as it is currently now because it's changed a lot from like the most recent Google Earth picture. So hopefully within the next week I'll have a lot more information and better drawings.
Oh, I think you're off to a good start. I like exactly where your garden's going here because I was saying, because I couldn't really tell from the notes. I was saying put it in this area. So I think you got it right there.
Yeah, I mean, right around the house, it kind of slopes down pretty good. So that was like the most flat, accessible area closest to the house with access to water. So
That's good.
yeah.
That's good. Well, I think it's going to be fabulous. I hope we get to see more pictures of it.
Yeah, I'll get some
Thank
more.
Thank you. Good work. Good work. All right. Martha, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Yay. Well, I must say, are you an architect? I mean, your drawings are pretty professional looking.
Yes, I'm a landscape designer.
You are. Okay.
Yeah.
So do you want to share with us what you have here? It's pretty self-explanatory, but just your thoughts.
Yes, so clearly the one on the left is our existing backyard. And years ago, I planted spruce trees where it says old spruce tree screen. So it really cut my yard, basically a quarter of the yard off. Just because in the way back is where deer go back and forth. And so I was giving them free rein, if you will. And then on the most bottom part is a highway. So that's what we're dealing with basically in our backyard is a highway. But now what I want to do is expand our yard and do an evergreen hedge at the way back of the property to help screen the highway. We have a sound wall there, so you don't see the highway, you just see a big sound wall. But then leave an open area for the deer to pass. And then I'm able to expand the garden, if you will. I want to include lawn. We have a dog. We actually like having grass in our backyard, so I don't want to get rid of the lawn. So I was just trying to figure out a way to organize the yard in a better way. And so I think I can do that with the 4-square garden that we talked about last week. And then the focus point would be the greenhouse. I grew up in the South, so I love camellias and plants that don't grow in St. Louis, but we could keep them in the greenhouse during the winter. Citrus trees, we have citrus trees. that we just store in our office right now, which is not probably the best thing to do for them, but yeah, that's where I am. And then on the side, our yard is a lot, I feel like, who went to people before me that had the swimming pool in our side yard. I feel like our yards are very similar, long and narrow. And so our neighbors are super close to us. And, but I have evergreen hedges on either side, which might be an idea for you because they're not going to drop leaves to go in your neighbor's pool. But it does give you that privacy.
That arborvitae. Yes. Great. So do I have the right angle here? Is this you're going to be taking up all this and putting this in? Is that it?
Exactly. Yes. And I want to expand my terrace. Right now it's just a small little square and then it's a walkway that goes over to the gate. And so I want to expand the terrace so it's a much better place to gather.
Yeah. Well, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And what I commented to Martha is I love the way she's keeping this open for a deer passage because there's not much you can do about that. And if you know that that's where they're going through, you might as well leave it. They don't come and bother your arborvitae. They just kind of stick to their own plan.
Oh, no. They get in my backyard and they have annihilated my hydrangeas. Yeah, they're bad. That's why I want to, if you see on the proposed backyard, I want to do
putting a deer fence in right there.
A tall, yes, but hopefully the trees that go in front of it will kind of break it up a little bit. So I don't feel like I'm what you mentioned being in a batting cage.
Well, I just think it's beautiful. I mean, I was just like, wow, this is nice. You've really transformed it. And so I guess what you'll be doing this week is figuring out what kind of beds you're going to put in and what kind of paths and your benches. I think you already got your benches in there. You know, well,
I think I would do right now. Our terrace is gravel, so those sort of those secondary paths in the garden beds would probably be gravel too, to just continue with the existing material that we have.
And then you would probably get, and this is something we really haven't talked about that much, but you would probably get a landscaper in to do it, right? I mean, this is going to be a big job to do.
Yes, so I work hand in hand with the landscaper. He does a lot of my installation projects. So
Good. Because I mean, that's one of those things that some of us would say, God, I don't know how I would even get started with that. But that's why we have landscapers, because they're in the business to do these things. So that's great. Good. I love it. Anybody want to make a comment or thoughts on it? All right, I'll keep moving. Good job, Martha. Thank you. Nicole, are you here?
I'm here. Yep.
Hi. Hi. So you were one of those who included a design, a photograph of your yard, which is helpful to see. Is this taken like this week? Is it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beginning of the week.
Let me just see if we have two designs for you. If I just okay, so this is the big picture and the small picture here. So do you want to explain what's going on, what you have in mind?
Sure. So my husband and I decided that the best place for a kitchen garden would be over on the left-hand side, as you see it here, in that space. I originally, I would have loved it to be closer to the house, or if you see where the house is, and then on the upper right-hand corner of the house is our deck, which is my happy place. I love it. And then the steps go down to the garden, and I would have loved to have the kitchen garden closer to that so we could see it from the house and the dining room and the deck. But it just won't work there. We already have these existing, you see a little bit of it there. There's an herb garden that's kind of a horseshoe shape. And then, so, and we like that, but I'd like to, where you see the herb garden is that little horseshoe shape. And then I'd like to put an arbor in to kind of like welcome you into the garden. Yeah, right. So it's just to the right there.
Yeah. Right
it's
there.
hard to read my writing, but yeah, so one of the paths, kind of goes under the arbor, the path to the garden gate. So I'd like to, kind of have an entrance to the garden with climbing vines and then you'll get to the kitchen garden. We do have water, which is, uh, kind of at the the upper left-hand corner of that herb garden. I have a little arrow pointing to,
Water.
yeah.
Right
So
there.
we do have water, but yeah, my husband and I went back and forth as to the positioning, but we also you'll see on the right-hand side of our property, is our neighbor, right there, but, on our property, we have an acre here, full acre. We might put an, accessory dwelling unit, an ADU back there. So, we weren't, we didn't want to encroach on the right side of the house there. But, yeah, I've been thinking about this kitchen garden for many years, but, it's so overwhelming to have an acre because especially you see we have no fences and deer come through and all sorts of animals. So I started small. I started with the herb garden, and then you can't see it, but you see the brick pathway. We have a fire pit there next to the herb garden, and then a brick pathway. And at the end of the brick pathway going south, there's another huge garden bed that I had to fence in. We have, all the things the deer like, um, uh, um, uh, I have hydrangea in there and, not coleus. What's the big, with the purple flowers that come up at the end of,
Lilacs?
I'm sorry?
Lilacs?
No, like on on the ground. I can't believe I'm losing the name.
That's okay. It's late at night. So I'm just going to make a suggestion. So, this looks great and I like the way you have it lined up and stuff. I'm thinking that the view of it, well, first of all, if you go in that side door, maybe you could do, if you would try maybe turning it a little, just thought, if you turned it a little bit and maybe tried a triangular thing, that I think that your viewing might be interesting. I mean, I'm not saying that this is the way to go, but just play with that a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, my son said, why don't you have the entrance, on the south side?
Yeah.
Right there. So, and I was like, yeah, why did I have it there? So,
And again, if you were going to try and do something like turn it a little on its axis and maybe try doing a 4 triangles instead of 4 squares, and then you're actually going into it from that spot too. Again, when you get to this point where you decide, the exercise that we're going to do in the last class is sticks and twine. So when you decide on it, you're going to actually put stakes in the ground and put some string around it, and then you're going to walk through, and then you'll really get a sense of where you want to go into that garden. But on paper, it always looks a little different than it does in real life. But your assignment is really to come up with, if you love it, that's great, but maybe you could try some variations on the theme just to see how it might fit into that space too. Because you've got a lot of movement here, and this feels rigid to me in some way.
oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I'm a big advocate of symmetry and foursquare. I think you might be, and I like the fact that you have a garden shed there too. And
I was thinking I might put it on the north side. It would give me more light because I want it to be like an open shed just with shelves.
and this corner here, what's going on there?
So in back of that large tree right there, there's a shed, and then I'd like to put in a rain basin, but I don't know if that's the place for it, if that's a good spot for it, but just to catch some of the overflow. I don't know how
Have
close.
anything there? You don't have anything there now, right?
Correct. No, yeah, there used to be some fruit trees there, but they're long gone. Yeah.
So one of the things I suggested to Nicole is has a wildflower patch here, but why why not integrate that in maybe the perimeters of the garden here so that it's not its own separate garden? Because you're going to have, just trying to work around all these things with a lawnmower. You got to keep the husbands happy. So integrating your gardens as much as you can, maybe put the wildflowers in the center, or maybe just do a strip of wildflowers around the front or something like that. I think that will consolidate things and
I-
give you more space.
I did plan to put some flowers around the perimeter and I don't know, maybe boxwoods or something to make it real pretty. And I eventually want to build up around these pathways, in different heights.
Great.
Yeah, things as you walk into the garden.
That's great. Good. Well, you're thinking and you're doing the right thing, so it looks good. Let me just see. I think you had this one picture here that shows you more detail of the garden.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah, it's real messy, but
No,
yeah.
it's fine. It's fine. It's really it's what my designs look like. You're in a creative mode and you just want to get it on paper. So you're doing great. It's good. Gives us a better idea.
I think you or somebody in your book, you had said you have to be careful about wind. You have to notice where the wind comes through, and we kind of have a wind tunnel going from east to west, but I don't really know how much that will affect it. I had said maybe I should put some short boxwoods or something on the eastern side and on the western side, to shield, the wind. But yeah, and then anyway, berries in the back and
But you don't have to have the compost way out there. You can bring it in a little closer area too, in some way, maybe on either side of the shed.
yes, I will do that. It's right now it's on the border of my with my neighbors on the east side of our property. I will I'll move it in.
But I see you did it because it shows it lines up with the gate so you can get through there. But it's good. Keep going. I think you're on a roll. Great. Thank you, Nicole, for sharing this. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Kim, are you with us?
I am. I first want to say I appreciate your cat. I notice he hits you every once in a while too. That's awesome. Yeah. So this one, it's like a real long, thin lot. It's my mom's house and she just bought it and it's grass. It's all grass and then really big trees. And they're very big trees, so they do throw a lot of shade and they also dry the ground out underneath them quite a bit. So planting anything really near them is it's not a thing. And I think even planting small plants underneath them is probably not so much a thing. But I wanted to put something in there, but I also know that she doesn't want to focus on vegetables, and she's a single woman living by herself. So she also doesn't need a lot of quantity. And I think she also doesn't need a tremendous amount of maintenance. So the front of the yard, I kind of built off of the fact that she's already got some height she's got like tall yew on one side, but they're tall and there's nothing next to them. So it's just a scraggly set of yews. And I thought, well, you could have bushes, things like that bring it down lower to the ground, but do it gracefully rather than having just this dead zone underneath some yew. So that was sort of the front yard area. And that to me feels like just kind of make it pretty, but make it so you don't need to mow it. You don't need to take the mower up there anymore. Then in the back, I wanted to make it feel more of of an area that's relaxing to be in, that's very focused on greenery, that just feels like a tranquil sort of space. So, and she's got one oddity, which is she is got a neighbor that sits up higher than her, who likes to sit on their porch and like stare into her yard, which is, I mean, when I'm in her yard, I feel it's very uncomfortable, and thinks it's very uncomfortable too. So she's got some evergreens that she's planted back there. It'll take them a little while to grow, of course, but my thinking is, she could put a nice trellis, she could kind of create a nice seating zone with that, and it's actually really small on the screen, but there's kind of where there's the 5 green circles right underneath those.
Right in here.
That's where I'm thinking she could have a nice trellis, in there, a nice trellis, kind of surround a little area where a bench is behind that. and have, you know, taller flowers, things like that, but make a nice little mulched area with a bench or a nice seat in it that she could sit in. I do have a little greenhouse on one side of it. She's moving up from Austin, so she's going to have her plants that she wants to be able to keep, and she's not going to be able to keep them in Ohio if she doesn't have a greenhouse. And then the 3 little circles, which I have the larger picture of, and I know I saw in your thing, you said, don't do circles. They're going to be like, they're hard for people to garden. But I think if they're smaller, then maybe, I don't know. I think that's one of the things I'll play with in terms of, you know, come up with alternative ways. And then this is my personal thing. I always wish I could have espaliered trees. She's got a tall, you know, it's tall and it's brand new, which is nice, but it's a wooden privacy fence and it's 6 feet tall. We're going to paint it all black. So it has kind of a nice elegant look to it. And I think putting 2 espaliered apple trees against that would be absolutely beautiful.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I just think you've done a gorgeous job with this. I was so wowed by it. It's beautifully illustrated, and you've really put some thought into it. I'm impressed.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody else agrees with me. You've really done a good job. How are you going to build those round things though? Do you know?
I think they won't have to be really tall. So I was thinking maybe just like flexible metal, something like that. Even, and I don't know how well it'll work. I have never tried this, but even something like flashing potentially. I know on my own, I've done where I've taken, you know, fencing that's like the planks that are the rough hewn wood and just made those like it made it, you know, so that it was round. So it could be something like that, but I don't think they need to be very tall. So I'm going to play with the idea of just using taller flashing to kind of enclose things.
You know, a lot of people use those cattle tub things, you know, whatever they're called. Let me do some research for you because I was
Okay.
looking at something similar to that because I have somebody else who's using this metal, but it's a more substantial and I think it would be very elegant. I'm trying to find my pen here. I'll put that in the resources. I'll send you a note on that one.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. Because I think about whiskey barrels, like I have 4 big whiskey barrels. They're probably not big enough for you, but those are really easy and you can get them at the heart, you know, those half whiskey barrels and you could do
Yeah.
maybe 5 of them instead of 3 of them. And I grow lots of stuff in them and they're very natural because it's wood. And they might look nice there.
I did look at those and think about that, and I've seen them, you know, they can look very, very nice in gardens, so it's definitely an option.
Yeah, great. Good. Well, make sure you put a bench out there so your mom can sit. But I love that you're designing this for her. I love that. That's great. I look forward to next week and seeing what new ideas you come up with. Thank you. Thank you. Very nice work. Appreciate it. Kathy, are you with us? I think you are. You know, there's no repeat names in this group, which is really nice. So I don't have to put your last names. Then maybe it's getting too late for everybody because it's after 8:30. So Kathy did quite a long description of what she was looking for in her garden, and then this lovely drawing. So I think a lot of you did a lot of thinking about your garden and writing up wonderful essays on what you're hoping to do. So I think that will guide you in creating these gardens. But if Kathy isn't here, we're going to keep going on. Samantha, are you here? We're losing everybody. No? Well, Samantha did exactly what we asked her to do, which is to come up with the measurements and the big picture, the house, the driveway, the directions, and then created all of this lovely visionary kind of things of what she's hoping to put into the yard. And I'm trying to see where the kitchen garden is. Don't know if I see it, but raised beds maybe in this area. Anyways, I hope that Samantha, you can tell us more next time when we see you. Anne, are you with us?
Hi,
Boy,
I am.
You
And I did tell you that the kindergartner is now presenting with my drawings, so I apologize.
No, it's fine. It's
Oh,
fine.
no.
I wasn't clear if this is the raised bed that you have now. This is in place.
We did, so I'm the girl from Colorado and we just
Yeah.
put those in.
Uh-huh.
And then behind that, there's a berm. And so out here, there's a lot of crevice gardens or rock gardens. So we put in step behind this, there's gonna be a fence around that, or there is. And then we have a lot of boulders and steppers that then go up on this berm. And then we'll have a crevice garden with natives. And I've planted a lot of daffodils and irises in the crevice garden. Hopefully they'll show up this spring.
So this is the crevice garden for all those who
Behind
don't.
it, there was, yes, correct. It's
So
pretty
I
long.
just think this is beautiful. You've done a gorgeous job with this. And this, I assume, is going to be your deer fence or something?
It's a fence and I think the fence really defines the garden. So next time I'll show you a picture and we painted it blue, kind of like the house. So I think there's a little bit of room to put some interesting accent, something in the middle. And I've never grown in raised beds. I had a 500, 600 square foot vegetable garden at home, but this will be a new experience. This is only about 75 feet, but it'll give me a chance to remember what it's like to have veggies and stuff outside the door. And this is right outside the kitchen. And, in the mountains, you want to keep the view. So height, you can't, you have to keep that in mind because the view is.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous. So your bench is going to go right here, right?
Or otherwise on the patio to your left, that's a big patio right outside, so that'll look into the garden, and there's a gate in the front and in the back, so I can go out the back, and those will be all natives. And again, we use a lot of boulders, and then my seating is some big boulders I put at the top of this berm, so that we can sit up there.
Nice.
My kids wanted a hot tub, you guys, but I nixed that idea. So.
Well, I did include this picture of your dog sitting there.
Yeah, and that's the crevice garden, and those were the boulders. So
Oh,
I don't know, maybe a fire
what
pit,
that
I don't
was.
know, something up there. This all just went in September. So
Oh, God, it's so great.
So
So
we'll
you're
see.
taking this class, but you already have your design. So
I have a little, but there's so much more that would be fun to do. But yes, I have this, but you guys have inspired me with really good ideas. So I'm excited to be here.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Your soil, look how dark that soil is. Wow. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. But this is inspiring because look, you've done a lot of the things that we've talked about. Get that nice gravel in there. I look forward to seeing another photo of it as it comes
Yeah,
along.
thank you.
What are you planting this time of year in Colorado? Anything?
No, I did buy a cold frame, but it's under about 12 inches of snow. So this picture was from the fall.
I figured it was.
But I'll put in, we can get some things in there, things over winter and a lot of old, lettuces and things.
Yeah. Well, I think it's beautiful. It's very inspiring. It's fun to see the landscape. Live
Yeah,
in a
so
beautiful-
different. I
beautiful-
miss all those trees that all of you have.
Oh, yeah, all our trees.
But thank you.
Dog, happy dog.
Yeah.
That's lovely. Thank you. Yeah, keep sending more photos. I want to see them. They're great.
Okay, thank you, Ellen.
Thank you. Samantha, did I just try Samantha? Are you with us? Maybe I'm confused here. Nope. Sue, are you with us?
I'm here.
Yay. All right, good. I have 3 of your pictures. Okay, so we have your big picture. We have your
and
picture
that's,
and then your 5-year plan.
yeah. So a previous owner actually had put in a chain link fence, 8 foot, where the kitchen garden is now. So I've been using that. I mean, it looks like a cage, but it's very effective. It's I'd like to expand it so there's space behind it. I can double the size of the kitchen garden.
Right. And
It
that's
is
what we
it is
have
pretty
now.
far from the house. Yeah, so there it is now on that.
Yep.
And the only thing that's permanent in it is a 8-inch raised bed there. So I move things around every year. And then off on the left, I was hoping to make a composting area there. So there's that
Nice.
tends to be in the shade from that tree on the left.
Uh-huh.
I can grow I have a little strawberry box area in it. And I have put my orchids out there in the summer. But I think that'd be a great composting area there.
Yeah. And then your design is to flip it and it makes this wonderful entrance into this path. I thought that was such a nice idea.
Yeah, I can't believe it worked well. So it used to be, it looks like, so there's like a 1-foot concrete foundation along the front of the existing garden, and then the back edge of the what I would like to expand to. So it used to be some kind of foundation. So the area is completely flat. It just has grass.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
So, are you happy with the design, what you're doing, and are you good continuing to work on this?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna work on what's there to make it more inspiring, and then make a plan for the new part,
Yeah,
possibly.
that's great.
Mm.
I think you're off to a good start because I mean, even though it is a little far from the house, it seems to be in a
Yeah.
good spot. It seems to be just fine.
Yeah, there's nothing really I can do about that. And my tool shed is in the barn, so, and I get lots of exercise going back and forth.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's great, Sue. Good work. Good work.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, listen, everybody, it's 9:15. I think I have a couple more, but why don't I add those to the next class? I don't know how many of you are still with us. Oh my gosh, I still have a lot of you. I'm sorry if I didn't get to yours today, but if you have any, I think you're all doing great work, and I think we need to sign off because it's 9:15.
Thank you so much.
But
Thank you.
great.
Bye.
Bye.